I'm here to fix a $500 million problem, the janitor's daughter tells the CEO. He laughs, and then the poor girl saves the company. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The emergency board meeting at Sterling Industries was supposed to be private. Behind the mahogany doors of the 42nd floor, 12 of New York's most powerful executives sat around a marble table, their faces grave as death. The company's stock had plummeted 60% in 3 months. $500 million, gone like smoke in the wind. Richard Sterling, the silver-haired CEO who'd built this empire from nothing, loosened his Italian silk tie. At 65, he'd seen storms before, but this felt different. This felt like the end. The auditors found nothing. Sarah Chen, the sharp-eyed CFO, reported. Every department checked out clean. We're hemorrhaging money and nobody knows why. That's when the conference room door creaked open. A small figure appeared, blonde pigtails bouncing, wearing a faded pink dress and scuffed sneakers. 7-year-old Emma Thompson clutched a worn backpack and looked up at the startled executives with curious blue eyes. "Excuse me," she said in a voice clear as a bell. "I came to fix your $500 million problem." The room fell dead silent. Richard Sterling's eyebrows shot up and nervous chuckles rippled around the table. Who was this child? How did she even get past security? "Sweetheart," Richard said with a condescending smile, "this is a grown-up meeting. Where's your mummy?" "My daddy's Jack Thompson. He cleans your offices," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "And I don't have a mummy anymore." Her words carried no self-pity, just simple truth. "But I know why your company's losing money." More laughter erupted. Margaret Sterling, Richard's wife and board member, shook her head. "Richard, call security. This is absurd." But something in Emma's steady gaze made Richard pause. This wasn't an ordinary child seeking attention. There was intelligence there, ancient wisdom in those young eyes that made his skin prickle. "You think this is funny?" Emma asked, pulling a crumpled sheet of paper from her backpack. "Your supply chain management system has a recursive loop error in the inventory algorithm. It's been ordering duplicate shipments for the past 4 months, but your accounting software isn't catching it because the orders are being processed through different subsidiary codes." The laughter died instantly. Sarah Chen leaned forward, her face pale. "What did you just say?" Emma set the paper on the table. It was covered in neat handwriting, complex mathematical equations, flowcharts, and calculations that would challenge a graduate business student. "I've been watching," Emma continued, her small voice filling the enormous room. "Daddy works nights, so I come with him sometimes. I see the delivery trucks, the paperwork, the confused workers. You're buying everything twice but paying different companies, so it looks normal in your books." Richard Sterling felt his heart hammering. He grabbed the paper with trembling hands. The calculations were not only correct, they were brilliant. This wasn't child's play. This was the work of a mathematical genius. How do you know this?" he whispered. Emma tilted her head, blonde pigtails swaying. "Numbers talk to me. They always have." She paused, studying his shocked face. "Don't you hear them too?" The executives exchanged bewildered glances. In 30 years of business, Richard had never encountered anything like this. A 7-year-old girl, the daughter of their night janitor, had just identified a problem that had stumped their team of Harvard MBAs and Wall Street consultants. But as Emma turned to leave, she dropped one more bombshell that would haunt Richard Sterling's dreams. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "the $500 million problem, that's just the beginning. Someone's been very, very clever. And if you don't stop them soon—" She looked back with those impossibly wise eyes. "Your company won't exist by Christmas." Richard Sterling couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., he found himself walking through Sterling Industries' empty corridors, Emma's words echoing in his mind like a haunting melody. The night security guard, an elderly man named Frank who'd worked there for 15 years, nodded respectfully as Richard made his way to the supply storage area. "Trouble sleeping, Mr. Sterling? You've been walking these halls a lot lately." "Something like that, Frank. Just thinking. That little girl who visited today, heard she caused quite a stir in the boardroom." Richard paused. News travelled fast in this building. "What did you hear?" "Jack Thompson's daughter, sweet kid, always polite when she comes by with her dad." Frank's weathered face softened. "Lost her mother, you know. Tragedy, what that family's been through." That's where Richard found Jack Thompson, methodically mopping the marble floors with the same careful precision he'd noticed in his daughter's mathematical calculations. When Jack looked up and saw the CEO, his face went white as the polished floors he maintained. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry about Emma today. She shouldn't have burst into your meeting like that. Kids don't understand boundaries, you know? I've talked to her about staying in the supply room when she comes with me, but sometimes she gets curious and—" "Don't apologize," Richard interrupted, his voice gentler than Jack had ever heard it. "Tell me about your daughter." Jack's hands trembled on the mop handle, leaving small water droplets on the pristine floor. "She's always been different, sir. Started reading when she was 3. Not just picture books, but my newspapers, instruction manuals, anything with words. By 5, she was solving math puzzles that stumped adults. Her teachers say she's gifted, but we can't afford special schools or tutors." "What happened to her mother?" Pain flashed across Jack's weathered face like lightning in a storm. "Cancer, pancreatic. 2 years ago this December. We fought it for 8 months, but—" His voice broke. "Medical bills took everything. Our house, our savings, our hope. That's why I work 3 jobs now. This one, morning shift at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, weekend construction work. Emma never complains, never asks for things we can't afford." Richard studied this broken man who'd raised a mathematical genius alone while working himself to exhaustion. The injustice struck him like a physical blow. Here was a father sacrificing everything for his child, while Richard's own daughter lived in luxury but couldn't balance her own checkbook. "Jack, I need to ask you something important. Has Emma been coming here often?" "Sometimes she has to. No babysitter, no family left since Mary died. She sits quiet in the supply closet, does her homework, reads library books. Never bothers anyone, never touches anything she shouldn't." Jack's voice cracked with exhaustion and desperation. "Please don't fire me, Mr. Sterling. She's all I got left in this world." Richard placed a firm hand on Jack's shoulder, feeling the tension in the man's thin frame. "You're not getting fired. In fact, I think your daughter just saved our company." "But Jack, if what Emma said is true, someone here is stealing from us, someone with access to our systems." Jack's eyes widened with genuine surprise. "Emma told me she noticed strange things, delivery schedules that didn't match, invoices with wrong dates, trucks coming twice for the same orders. She keeps notebooks about patterns she sees, says numbers tell stories that people miss." "Notebooks?" "Yeah, fills them up faster than I can buy new ones. Sometimes I find her writing at 2 a.m., explaining that the numbers were talking to her and she had to get it down before she forgot." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. If Emma had been documenting irregularities for months, she might have evidence of the biggest corporate conspiracy in Sterling Industries' history. And if she was right about the Christmas deadline. "Jack, I need to speak with Emma again. Soon. But not here. Somewhere she feels safe to talk." The next evening, Richard Sterling did something he'd never done in 30 years of running Sterling Industries. He drove his Mercedes through the pothole-riddled streets of South Queens, past bodegas with barred windows and apartment buildings that had seen better decades. The Thompson apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up with peeling paint and broken mailboxes. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and dreams deferred. Jack answered the door, still in his Murphy's Diner uniform, coffee stains and all. "Mr. Sterling, what are you doing here?" Before Richard could answer, Emma appeared behind her father, backpack already in hand. "I knew you'd come," she said simply, those impossibly wise blue eyes meeting his. "The numbers told me you would." The apartment was small, but spotless. Every surface cleaned with the same meticulous care Jack brought to the Sterling Industries offices. Emma's corner was remarkable, a makeshift desk constructed from a cardboard box and a wooden board, covered with notebooks, pencils worn down to nubs, and mathematical sketches that would impress MIT professors. A photograph of a beautiful woman with Emma's blonde hair and bright smile sat prominently on the makeshift desk. Mary Thompson's presence still filled this small space. "Show me," Richard said, settling onto the worn couch that probably came from a thrift store. Emma opened her first notebook with the reverence of a scholar presenting ancient texts. Page after page revealed meticulous documentation. Delivery truck arrival times, cross-referenced with invoice numbers, supplier names mapped to phone numbers and addresses, quantity discrepancies calculated down to the penny. But it was more than raw data. It was a pattern as clear as a road map. "See here?" Emma pointed to a hand-drawn chart that would rival anything produced by Sterling Industries' analytics department. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, Pinnacle Supplies delivers twice. Same order, same products, different truck drivers. But your computer system shows them as separate companies, Pinnacle and Peak Distribution." Richard's blood ran cold as he studied her calculations. "They're the same company. Same address on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. Same phone number with different extensions. Same manager signature. Vincent Carrera. I checked by calling and asking for quotes on office supplies." Emma flipped pages with the confidence of a seasoned auditor. "They've stolen $4.7 million just in the past 6 weeks, but it's accelerating." "How did you verify the addresses?" Emma smiled, the first genuine smile Richard had seen from her, transforming her serious face into that of the child she should be allowed to be. "I ask the delivery drivers when they come for lunch breaks. They're nice to me, especially Tommy Rossini. He has a daughter my age. They told me both companies operate from the same warehouse, same loading dock, even share the same office space." Richard stared at this extraordinary child who lived in poverty but possessed analytical skills that surpassed his Harvard-educated executives. While his team of consultants fumbled in boardrooms, a 7-year-old had solved their mystery, using nothing but keen observation and human connection. "Emma, there's something else you said, about the company not existing by Christmas. What did you mean?" Her smile faded, replaced by an expression too grave for such a young face. "The stealing is getting bigger, Mr. Sterling. More companies, more fake orders, larger amounts each time, but that's not the scary part." Emma's blue eyes grew serious, and Richard felt the temperature in the small apartment drop. "Someone inside your building is helping them. Someone who knows your security codes, your computer passwords, your meeting schedules. How can you be so certain?" "Because," Emma whispered, her small voice somehow filling the room, "they knew about yesterday's emergency meeting. The delivery schedules were changed right after you called that meeting. And only 12 people were supposed to know about it." Jack Thompson, who'd been listening from the kitchen, dropped a plate. The crash seemed to echo Emma's ominous words. Sarah Chen was pacing in Richard's office when he arrived the next morning, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, her normally composed demeanor cracked with barely controlled panic. "Richard, we have a serious problem. Someone accessed our financial servers last night between midnight and 2 a.m. They downloaded comprehensive supply chain reports from the past 6 months, vendor contracts, and employee access logs. Richard's coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor in a spray of ceramic and Colombian dark roast. What time exactly? The logs show activity from 12:17 a.m. to 1:43 a.m. It was an authorized login. Someone with executive-level clearance who knew exactly what they were looking for. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. Richard, they didn't just browse randomly. They went straight to the most sensitive financial data. Emma's words echoed in Richard's mind. Someone inside your building is helping them. Sarah, I need a complete list of everyone who attended yesterday's board meeting, and I need their computer access logs for the past 2 weeks, not just last night. Richard, what's going on? You've been acting strange since that little girl barged into our meeting. You can't seriously believe that a child could understand our financial systems. He turned to face his CFO of 15 years. A woman he'd trusted with his company's deepest secrets, someone he'd considered like a sister. That little girl identified our $500 million leak in 30 seconds flat, Sarah. She may have just saved Sterling Industries from bankruptcy. Sarah's expression shifted, confusion mixing with something that might have been fear. You can't be serious. A 7-year-old child? Dead serious. And Sarah, she thinks someone on our board is directly involved in the theft. The color drained from Sarah's face as if someone had opened a valve. That's impossible, Richard. These are people you've known for decades. Margaret, James, Patricia, they're not just board members, they're family. Get me those access logs, all of them. And Sarah, don't mention this conversation to anyone. Not yet. That afternoon, Richard found himself in an unlikely location. The Sterling Industries supply closet on the 40th floor, sitting cross-legged on the industrial carpeting with Emma Thompson. She'd transformed the cramped space into a war room, spreading her notebooks around them like a general planning a crucial battle. The bad person knows computers very well, Emma explained, drawing interconnected circles around names in her notebook with different colored pencils. They change the orders after delivery, but before accounting processes them. Very smart, very careful timing. How sophisticated are we talking about? College smart, maybe business school smart. They understand exactly how your company's systems talk to each other, where the gaps are when people aren't watching. Emma looked up at Richard with those penetrating blue eyes that seem to see through walls. They know your company better than most employees do. Richard felt ice crystallizing in his veins. Emma, what if I told you that someone accessed our computer system last night, just hours after our meeting? Emma wasn't surprised, merely nodded as if confirming a mathematical proof. That makes perfect sense. They're scared now because they know someone is getting close to the truth. Scared people make mistakes. But how would they know about you specifically? You were only in that boardroom for 10 minutes. Emma's face grew grave, and she pointed to a small security camera mounted in the corner of the supply closet. Mr. Sterling, what if they've been watching the security cameras all along? Dud. At 11 p.m. that evening, Richard Sterling sat in the security office with Emma and Jack Thompson, reviewing footage from the past 48 hours on multiple screens. The head of security, Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent with steel-grey hair and suspicious eyes, had been reluctant to cooperate until Richard explained the full scope of what they were investigating. I've worked corporate security for 20 years, Marcus said, adjusting the controls. I've seen embezzlement, industrial espionage, even insider trading, but a 7-year-old uncovering a multi-million-dollar conspiracy, that's a first. Emma sat between the two men, her small legs dangling from the chair, pointing at timestamps and camera angles with the precision of a trained investigator. There, Emma said, pointing at screen number 3. Tuesday, 6:47 p.m., camera 12 in the supply processing area. The black and white footage showed someone entering the supply room where deliveries were logged and processed. The figure wore a Sterling Industries security badge and moved with the confident familiarity of someone who belonged there, someone who knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. "Can you enhance this?" Richard asked, his throat suddenly dry. Marcus worked the digital controls, zooming in on the security badge dangling from the person's neck. The ID number became clearly visible in the enhanced image. SE4471. "That's Margaret Sterling's badge," Marcus said quietly, his professional composure cracking slightly. Richard's world tilted on its axis, his wife of 22 years. His business partner, who'd helped him build Sterling Industries from a small import company into a Fortune 500 corporation. His trusted board member, who knew every secret, every weakness, every strength of their organization. That can't be right. There has to be some mistake." Emma gently touched his arm with her small hand. "Mr. Sterling, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most. My mommy taught me that before she got too sick to teach me anything else." Richard stared at the frozen image on the screen, his mind reeling with implications. Margaret had access to everything: financial records, board meeting schedules, computer passwords, supplier contracts. She'd been acting strangely lately, taking private phone calls in their home office, working late without explanation, becoming secretive about her daily activities. "Marcus, I need you to cross-reference something. Every major delivery discrepancy we've had in the past 6 months, I want to know if Margaret was in the building when they occurred." 25 minutes later, working through security logs and keycard access records, they had their answer. Every single suspicious incident coincided perfectly with Margaret's presence in the building, often during hours when she claimed to be elsewhere. "But why?" Richard whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We have everything: money, success, security, a beautiful life together." Emma looked at him with wisdom that seemed borrowed from someone much older. "Maybe she wanted something you couldn't give her, Mr. Sterling. Or maybe someone promised her something that seemed better than what she already had." Jack Thompson, who'd been silent throughout the investigation, finally spoke. "Mr. Sterling, my Emma's got good instincts about people. She could tell when her mother was hurting even before the doctors knew how bad it was. If she says your wife is involved." "Then we need proof," Richard finished, his voice hardening with resolve. "Real proof that will hold up in court and put these thieves behind bars." Emma opened her final notebook, the thick one she'd been saving for last. "Mr. Sterling, what if I told you I know exactly when and where they're planning their biggest theft?" Richard's heart stopped beating for a moment. "What? Tomorrow night at midnight? They're going to steal everything they can and disappear forever." Adele. The next evening, Emma sat in Richard's office leather chair, her small legs dangling like a child on a swing, while around the mahogany conference table sat 3 FBI agents that Marcus Webb had contacted through his federal law enforcement connections. Special Agent Diana Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with the bearing of someone who'd seen every kind of human deception, spread Emma's notebooks across the table like evidence in a criminal trial. "The pattern is absolutely clear," Agent Rodriguez explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built airtight cases against white-collar criminals. "Your wife and her associates have been systematically bleeding your company dry for 8 months. But tomorrow night, they're planning something much more ambitious and much more devastating." Emma spoke up, her young voice somehow commanding the attention of every adult in the room. "They're going to transfer $12.3 million to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Money from the employee pension fund that 3,000 people depend on for retirement." "How could you possibly know this?" Agent Rodriguez asked, leaning forward with professional interest. Emma opened her notebook to pages covered with phone numbers, times, dates, and fragments of overheard conversations written in her neat handwriting. I hide in the supply closet sometimes when Daddy works his night shift. Mrs. Sterling uses that room for private phone calls because she thinks nobody goes there after hours. She doesn't know I listen, but I do, and I write down everything important. Richard's hands trembled as he read Emma's meticulous notes. Margaret had been planning to destroy not just the company he'd built with his own hands, but the retirement security of 3,000 hard-working employees who'd trusted Sterling Industries with their future. "She's not working alone," Emma continued, turning pages with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. "There's a man named Vincent Carrera who runs all the fake supply companies, and someone at First National Bank named David Morrison is helping them move the money without triggering federal reporting requirements." Agent Rodriguez exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Emma, this is extremely important. Did you hear them mention the specific timing for this transfer? Tomorrow at midnight exactly. Mrs. Sterling said it has to happen when the overnight computer systems run their daily backup routines, because there's less chance of immediate detection. By the time anyone notices, the money will be gone forever." Richard closed his eyes, feeling the betrayal hit him like a physical assault. 22 years of marriage, building a life together, sharing dreams and fears and intimate moments. All of it reduced to corporate espionage and calculated theft. "Mr. Sterling," Agent Rodriguez said, her voice gentler now, "we need your cooperation to catch them in the act. But I have to warn you, this is going to be emotionally devastating. Are you prepared to help us arrest your wife?" Before Richard could answer, Emma slipped down from the oversized chair and took his large hand in both of her small ones. "Sometimes we have to do really hard things to protect the people we care about," she said softly, her blue eyes filled with compassion beyond her years. "My daddy taught me that when Mommy was sick and we had to make difficult decisions about her treatment." Richard looked down at this remarkable child who had saved his company, protected his employees' futures, and possibly saved his own life from financial ruin. In one extraordinary week, Emma Thompson had demonstrated more courage, intelligence, and moral clarity than anyone he'd ever encountered in decades of business. "Yes," he said firmly, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Let's stop them and make sure they pay for what they've done." But as the FBI agents finalized their surveillance plans and discussed arrest procedures, none of them noticed the shadow that briefly passed by Richard's office window, 42 floors above the street, or the person who had been listening to every word of their conversation through the building's internal communication system. Margaret Sterling smiled coldly as she pulled out her encrypted phone in the empty hallway. Time to accelerate the timeline and eliminate any potential witnesses. At 6 a.m. the next morning, Richard Sterling's phone exploded with urgent calls. Sarah Chen's panicked voice cut through his grogginess like a fire alarm. "Richard, you need to get here immediately. Someone initiated emergency financial protocols at 4 a.m. They're trying to transfer funds right now, not tonight, but this morning." Richard's blood turned to ice water. Margaret had overheard their conversation. She was moving the timeline up by 18 hours. "How much time do we have?" "The transfers are queued for execution at 8 a.m. when the international banking systems come online." "Richard, we're talking about the entire pension fund, not just the 12 million Emma mentioned, but everything. $28 million. Richard was already throwing on clothes, his hands shaking as he dialed Agent Rodriguez. "They moved it up," he said the moment she answered. "It's happening in 2 hours." "We're not ready," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Our surveillance equipment isn't in place, and we need more time to coordinate with banking authorities. Then we stop them ourselves." By 7 a.m., Richard stood in the Sterling Industries lobby with an unlikely team. Emma Thompson clutching her notebook, Jack Thompson looking determined despite his exhaustion, Agent Rodriguez with two fellow agents, and Marcus Webb reviewing building schematics. The transfer has to be executed from Margaret's executive terminal, Marcus explained. It requires biometric verification and her personal authorization codes. She'll have to be physically present. Emma studied the building blueprints with the intensity of a military strategist. Mrs. Sterling always uses the private elevator to avoid people when she's doing secret things. She'll go straight to her office on the 38th floor. How do you know that? Agent Rodriguez asked. I've watched her for months. She has patterns just like the numbers do. Richard felt a surge of admiration for this remarkable child, who noticed details that trained investigators missed. But his admiration was mixed with terror. If Margaret suspected Emma was the source of their information, his wife was capable of anything. Emma, I want you to stay in the lobby with Agent Martinez, Richard said firmly. This is going to be dangerous. Emma shook her head, her blonde pigtails swaying with determination. You need me, Mr. Sterling. I know her patterns, her backup plans. Mrs. Sterling is very smart, but she doesn't know that I understand her system. What system? Emma opened her notebook to a page covered with timestamps and floor plans she'd drawn from memory. She has escape routes planned. If something goes wrong with the transfer, she has 3 different ways to leave the building without being seen. But I know all of them. Agent Rodriguez studied Emma's diagrams with growing respect. This child has been conducting surveillance operations without realizing it. These notes are better than anything my team could have produced. Night at 7:30 a.m., the elevator to the 38th floor began its ascent. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs as he thought about confronting the woman he'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades. How long had she been planning this betrayal? How long had she been lying to his face while stealing from the people who trusted them? Remember, Agent Rodriguez whispered into her radio, we need her to actually initiate the transfer before we can make arrests. Otherwise, her lawyers will claim it was all theoretical. But when the elevator doors opened, Margaret Sterling was waiting for them. Hello, Richard, she said with a cold smile that he'd never seen before. I've been expecting you. Margaret Sterling stood behind her mahogany desk like a queen holding court. But this was a queen who'd been exposed as a traitor. Her usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, hair not quite as precisely styled, makeup applied hastily, clothing that spoke of someone who'd been awake all night planning. 22 years of marriage, Richard said, his voice heavy with pain and disbelief. 22 years, and you were planning to destroy everything we built together. Margaret laughed, but it was a sound devoid of warmth or love. Everything we built? Richard, you built Sterling Industries on the backs of underpaid workers while we lived in luxury. Do you know what the average employee here makes? $38,000 a year, while you pay yourself $4 million annually. That doesn't justify stealing from their pension fund, doesn't it? Margaret's eyes flashed with years of accumulated resentment. I watched you become someone I didn't recognize, someone who cared more about profit margins than people, someone who'd rather give a 7-year-old girl more attention in 1 week than you'd given me in the past 5 years. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward, her hand resting on her weapon. Mrs. Sterling, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and violation of federal banking regulations. Margaret smiled again, that same cold expression that chilled Richard's blood. I don't think so, Agent Rodriguez. You see, I know you've been listening to the conversations of a mentally unstable child who talks to imaginary numbers. Emma stepped out from behind her father, her blue eyes blazing with intelligence and righteous anger. I'm not mentally unstable, Mrs. Sterling. I'm just smarter than you thought. The little spy, Margaret sneered. Do you know what happens to little girls who eavesdrop on adult conversations? They learn things that are too dangerous for children to know. Richard felt rage building in his chest, like a volcanic eruption. "Are you threatening a 7-year-old child?" "I'm explaining reality," Margaret replied calmly. "Emma, sweetie, you've caused some very important people to lose a lot of money. People who don't like to lose money. People who know where little girls live and where their daddies work." Jack Thompson stepped protectively in front of his daughter, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by something fierce and dangerous. "Lady, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Margaret pressed a button on her desk, and suddenly the office door slammed shut with an electronic lock clicking into place. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, I think you all made the mistake. You see, the money transfer isn't scheduled for 8 a.m. It's already happened." Agent Rodriguez grabbed her radio, but it emitted only static. "Signals being jammed," she reported tersely. Emma pulled out a small device from her backpack, an old flip phone that Jack had given her for emergencies. "Mrs. Sterling, you forgot about something important." "What's that, little girl?" Emma smiled with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. "You forgot that I know all your computer passwords. And 20 minutes ago, while you were gloating, I used the lobby computer to freeze every Sterling Industries bank account." Margaret's face went white. "That's impossible. You're just a child." "I'm a child who's been watching you type your passwords for months. Your wedding anniversary, your mother's maiden name, your first pet's name, Whiskers 1985. Very predictable, Mrs. Sterling." Richard stared at Emma with amazement that bordered on worship. This incredible little girl had just outmaneuvered a woman with an MBA from Wharton and 20 years of business experience. Margaret lunged for her computer terminal, but Agent Rodriguez was faster. "Mrs. Sterling, step away from the keyboard." "You don't understand," Margaret screamed, her composed facade finally cracking. "The money is already moving. Vincent's people will kill me if this falls apart." Emma looked up at Richard with concern in her young eyes. "Mr. Sterling, who's Vincent? She mentioned someone named Vincent Carrera before, but there's someone else, isn't there? Someone more dangerous." Margaret's face had gone from white to grey. "Vincent Torino. Vincent Torino is expecting $28 million in his Cayman Islands account by 9 a.m. When it doesn't arrive." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Vincent Torino was not the small-time con artist they'd imagined. Within an hour of Margaret's arrest, Richard Sterling learned he was dealing with someone far more dangerous, a money laundering specialist with connections to organized crime families from New York to Miami. Agent Rodriguez hung up her phone with a grim expression. "Torino has been under federal investigation for 3 years. He's suspected of laundering over $200 million through legitimate businesses. Your wife wasn't just stealing from you, Richard. She was funneling money to a criminal enterprise." Emma sat in the FBI field office, her notebook spread across a conference table that was too big for her small frame. But her mind was working with the precision of a computer, connecting dots that trained agents had missed. "Mrs. Sterling was scared of him," Emma said quietly. In her phone conversations, she always sounded nervous when she talked to Vincent, like she was afraid of what would happen if she disappointed him. "How long were you listening to these calls?" Agent Rodriguez asked. 6 months, maybe longer. She always used the supply closet because she thought it was private. But I heard her crying sometimes after she hung up. People don't cry after business calls unless something bad is happening." Jack Thompson sat beside his daughter, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "Emma, baby, why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" "I didn't know it was bad at first, Daddy. I thought she was just working late like you do. But then the numbers started getting bigger and the crying got worse, and I realized something was very wrong." Richard felt a chill as he considered the implications. "Agent Rodriguez, if Torino is expecting $28 million and doesn't get it, he'll assume Margaret double-crossed him. People in his line of work don't accept excuses." At that moment, Richard's phone rang. The caller ID showed his home number. "Richard?" Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. I need help. They let me make one phone call and God help me, I called Vincent to try to explain. He's sending people to the office. He thinks you have his money. Margaret, what have you done? I'm sorry, Richard. I never meant for it to go this far. Vincent said if I could just get him some startup money, he'd help me leave you and start over. But then he wanted more, and I couldn't stop. The line went dead. Agent Rodriguez was already on her radio, coordinating with NYPD and federal tactical teams. All units, we have a potential hostage situation developing at Sterling Industries. Suspects are armed and extremely dangerous. Emma tugged on Richard's sleeve. Mr. Sterling, I know a way into the building that they won't know about, a way to get people out safely. Emma, absolutely not. This is too dangerous. But there are night shift workers in there, security guards, maintenance people, and Mrs. Henderson from accounting always works late on Fridays, if bad people are coming. Richard's blood ran cold. He'd been so focused on stopping Margaret that he'd forgotten about the innocent employees who might be in harm's way. Agent Rodriguez, how many people are typically in the building at this hour? According to your security logs, approximately 15 to 20 people, night security, cleaning crew, a few executives working late. Emma opened her notebook to a hand-drawn map of Sterling Industries service corridors and maintenance areas. I know every hiding place, every back stairway, every storage room. I can help get them out. Absolutely not, Richard said firmly. I won't put you in danger. Emma looked at him with those incredibly wise eyes. Mr. Sterling, sometimes little people can do big things that grown-ups can't. I'm small enough to use the service ducts. I'm quiet enough to move without being heard, and I know that building better than anyone. Jack Thompson stared at his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. Emma, sweetheart, what you're suggesting is the right thing to do, Daddy, just like when Mummy was sick and we had to be brave even when we were scared. Agent Rodriguez looked at this remarkable child who'd already solved one impossible case. Emma, if we let you help, you'd have to follow orders exactly. No improvising, no taking risks, no playing hero. Emma nodded solemnly. I understand, but Agent Rodriguez, I think Mrs. Sterling wasn't the only person inside Sterling Industries working with the bad people. I think there's someone else. Richard felt his world shift again. What do you mean? Someone had to give Vincent's people information about the building layout, security systems, employee schedules. Mrs. Sterling is smart, but she doesn't know technical things like that. Emma flipped to the last page of her notebook where she'd written a single name in red ink. I think Sarah Chen has been helping them all along. The revelation hit Richard like a physical blow. Sarah Chen, his CFO for 15 years, the woman he'd trusted with Sterling Industries' most sensitive financial information, someone he'd considered family, was the second insider working with Vincent Torino's criminal organization. That's impossible, Richard whispered. But even as he said the words, puzzle pieces began clicking into place in his mind. Sarah's unusual access to the computer systems, her detailed knowledge of the supply chain vulnerabilities, her presence during every crucial decision about financial protocols. Agent Rodriguez was already pulling up Sarah's background file on her laptop. Chen has gambling debts, she reported grimly. Significant ones. Atlantic City casinos, underground poker games, sports betting. We're talking about someone who owes money to very dangerous people. Emma nodded, with the sad wisdom of someone who'd learned too young that adults could be weak and make terrible choices. I heard Mrs. Sterling talking to her sometimes. Sarah was supposed to make sure the computer systems looked normal while the money was being moved. She was getting paid to help. How much was she getting paid? Richard asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. $2 million, Emma replied, consulting her notebook. Mrs. Sterling said Sarah would get her money after everything was finished and they were all far away. Jack Thompson shook his head in amazement. Emma, how did you remember all these details? These are complex adult conversations. I write everything down, Daddy. Numbers, names, amounts, dates. I learned from watching you work so hard to keep track of everything for our family. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but Richard caught the underlying love and respect she had for her father. Agent Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. Rodriguez, this is Team Leader Martinez. We have eyes on Sterling Industries. 3 vehicles just pulled up, black SUVs, tinted windows, at least 6 armed individuals entering the building through the main entrance. Copy that. What about the NYPD units? In position. But we're dealing with professionals here. These aren't street criminals. They're moving with military precision. Richard felt panic rising in his chest. Agent Rodriguez, Sarah has access to the employee directory. She knows exactly who's in the building and where they'll be. Which means Torino's people can target specific individuals, Rodriguez replied grimly. They'll use hostages to force you to transfer the money manually. Emma stood up from her chair, looking small but determined. Mr. Sterling, there's something else you need to know. Mrs. Sterling and Sarah weren't just stealing money. They were also copying files, employee records, personal information, home addresses. Why would they need that? Insurance, Emma replied, with a chilling matter-of-factness. If their plan failed, they could threaten people's families to keep them quiet. Richard stared at this 7-year-old girl, who understood criminal psychology better than most adults. Emma, how did you learn to think like this? When Mommy was sick, I had to learn to pay attention to what people really meant, not just what they said. Doctors, insurance people, bill collectors, they all said nice words, but their actions told different stories. Agent Rodriguez received another radio transmission. Rodriguez, we have a problem. Sarah Chen just entered the building through the employee parking garage. She's heading directly to the executive floors. Emma grabbed Richard's hand with both of her small ones. Mr. Sterling, Sarah's going to try to transfer the money herself, but she doesn't know that I froze the accounts. When Vincent's people realize they can't get the money, they'll start hurting innocent people, Richard finished, unless we stop them first. Agent Rodriguez looked at Emma with newfound respect. What do you have in mind? Emma smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Richard saw hope in that smile. I have an idea, but it's going to require everyone to trust a 7-year-old girl with a very dangerous plan. She opened her notebook to a detailed diagram of Sterling Industries' computer network that she'd drawn from memory, complete with access points, security protocols, and system vulnerabilities that would impress any IT specialist. Mrs. Sterling and Sarah made one big mistake, Emma said confidently. They assumed that a little girl couldn't understand their grown-up criminal plan. Richard leaned forward, hanging on every word. What's your idea, Emma? We're going to give Vincent Torino exactly what he wants, Emma replied, with a mischievous grin that reminded Richard she was still a child, despite everything. We're going to give him $28 million. Emma, we can't actually... We're not going to give him real money, Mr. Sterling. We're going to give him fake money that looks real just long enough to catch all the bad people. Agent Rodriguez stared at Emma's network diagram with amazement. Are you suggesting we create a false transfer that appears legitimate? Exactly. I can make the computer systems show that the money moved to Vincent's account, but it'll actually just be moving from one Sterling Industries account to another. The bad people will think they won, but they really lost. Jack Thompson looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. Emma, sweetheart, what you're describing is incredibly sophisticated. Are you sure you can do this? Emma nodded with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never met a mathematical problem she couldn't solve. Daddy, I've been practicing on the library computers for months. I know exactly how to make this work. Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. By 10 p.m., Sterling Industries had become the center of a complex federal operation. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with NYPD tactical teams positioned around the building, while Emma Thompson, sitting at a computer terminal in the FBI Mobile Command Unit, worked her mathematical magic, transferring $28 million to account number. Emma's small fingers flew across the keyboard with the speed and precision of a concert pianist. Done. Mr. Vincent's computer will show the money arrived, but it's actually just hiding in Sterling Industries' maintenance account. Richard watched in amazement as this 7-year-old girl manipulated financial systems that he barely understood. Emma, how long will it take them to realize the money isn't really there? About 6 hours if they're smart, maybe longer if they're not. The fake transfer will look perfect until Vincent tries to move the money to another account. Agent Rodriguez studied the building schematics one more time. Our biggest problem is Sarah Chen. She knows the building as well as you do, Richard. She can guide Torino's people to avoid our surveillance and find the employees we're trying to protect. Emma looked up from her computer screen. Agent Rodriguez, what if Sarah doesn't know we're coming? What do you mean? What if we make Sarah think her plan is working perfectly? What if we let her believe she's successfully transferring the money while we're actually recording everything she does? Richard felt a surge of admiration for Emma's strategic thinking. You want to let Sarah incriminate herself completely? Exactly. And while she's busy with the fake transfer, we can rescue the people in the building. Jack Thompson, who'd been quietly listening to his daughter plan a federal operation, finally spoke up. Emma, I'm proud of you, baby, but I'm also terrified. These are dangerous people. Emma took her father's weathered hand in both of her small ones. Daddy, remember what you taught me when Mommy was in the hospital? Sometimes we have to be brave, not because we're not scared, but because other people need us to be brave. Agent Rodriguez received an urgent radio transmission. Rodriguez, this is Martinez. We have movement on the 38th floor. Sarah Chen is at her computer terminal, and it looks like she's initiating financial transfers. Perfect, Emma said with satisfaction. She's taking the bait. What bait? Richard asked. Emma smiled. I sent Mrs. Chen a fake message 20 minutes ago, pretending to be from Vincent's people. It told her to execute the transfer immediately because law enforcement was getting too close. Agent Rodriguez stared at Emma with something approaching awe. You manipulated a criminal into exposing herself. I just told her what she wanted to hear, Emma replied simply. People believe things that match what they already want to believe. At that moment, Richard's phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. Richard, the transfer is complete. Vincent's people are leaving the building. Crisis averted. Emma giggled, the first truly childlike sound Richard had heard from her. She has no idea that Vincent's people are still in the building and the money never actually left. Which means, Agent Rodriguez began, which means we have about 10 minutes before everyone realizes they've been tricked, Richard finished. Then things are going to get very dangerous, very quickly. Agent Rodriguez keyed her radio. All units, this is Rodriguez. Operation is a go. Move in now. Repeat, move in now. Emma saved her work on the computer and stood up, looking remarkably calm for someone who'd just orchestrated a complex federal sting operation. Mr. Sterling, she said quietly, there's one more thing I need to tell you. Something I heard Mrs. Sterling say that I didn't write in my notebook because it scared me too much. Richard knelt down to Emma's eye level. What is it, sweetheart? Vincent Torino isn't just taking your money. He's planning to hurt you and your family to send a message to other business people. He wants everyone to know what happens when you don't pay him. Richard felt ice water in his veins. Emma, are you saying... I'm saying that even after we catch the bad people tonight, you're still going to be in danger. Vincent has more people working for him than just the ones in your building. Agent Rodriguez overheard the conversation. Richard, Emma's right. Taking down Torino's operation in your building is just the beginning. We'll need to put you and your family in protective custody until we can dismantle his entire organization. Emma looked thoughtful. Agent Rodriguez, what if we don't just catch the people in the building? What if we catch Vincent Torino too? Emma, Torino is probably in another state by now, waiting to see if the money transfer worked. Emma smiled with the confidence of someone who always thought 3 steps ahead. Agent Rodriguez, what if I told you I know exactly where Vincent Torino is right now and exactly how to make him come to us? Richard and Agent Rodriguez exchanged glances. This remarkable child had surprised them at every turn. What do you have in mind, Emma? Rodriguez asked. Emma opened her notebook to the very last page, where she'd written a phone number in red ink. I'm going to call Vincent Torino and tell him his money is missing, and then I'm going to invite him to come get it personally. Emma Thompson sat in the FBI Mobile Command Unit, holding a secure phone line while federal agents recorded every word. Her small hands were steady, but Richard could see the determination burning in her blue eyes as she prepared to make the most important phone call of her young life. Remember, Emma? Agent Rodriguez whispered. Just get him to confirm his location and his involvement. We'll handle the rest. Emma nodded and dialed the number she'd memorized from Margaret's secret conversations. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Vincent Torino speaking. Mr. Vincent, Emma said, disguising her voice to sound scared and confused. This is Margaret Sterling's assistant. There's a big problem with your money. What kind of problem? Torino's voice immediately became dangerous. The transfer worked, but then something went wrong with the computer system. Your money is stuck in a holding account, and Mrs. Sterling said only you have the special codes to fix it. Richard held his breath as Emma expertly manipulated one of New York's most dangerous criminals. Where is Margaret now? Torino demanded. She's at Sterling Industries trying to fix the computer, but she's very scared, Mr. Vincent. She says if you don't come help her personally, the FBI might find the money. There was a long pause. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tell Margaret she better have my 28 million ready, or she's going to regret the day she was born. Emma hung up and looked at Agent Rodriguez with satisfaction. He's coming. And Agent Rodriguez? He just confessed to expecting $28 million from Mrs. Sterling. Emma, you just did something that would impress veteran undercover agents, Rodriguez said, with genuine admiration. 15 minutes later, Vincent Torino's black limousine pulled up to Sterling Industries, followed by 2 SUVs full of armed men. But they weren't driving into a successful heist. They were driving into the largest federal law enforcement operation New York had seen in years. As Torino stepped out of his limousine, wearing an expensive suit and confident smile, FBI agents emerged from every conceivable hiding spot. The smile disappeared from his face as he found himself surrounded by 30 federal agents with weapons drawn. Vincent Torino, you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and racketeering, Agent Rodriguez announced with satisfaction. Inside the building, Sarah Chen's arrest was equally dramatic. She'd been so focused on her computer screen, trying to understand why the money transfer wasn't working properly, that she never noticed the FBI agents entering her office. Sarah Chen, step away from the computer, Agent Martinez commanded. Sarah spun around, her face white with terror. I was just trying to fix a technical problem. You were trying to steal $28 million from employee pension funds, Martinez replied. We have recordings of your conversations with Margaret Sterling and Vincent Torino. By midnight, it was over. Vincent Torino, his 6 associates, Margaret Sterling and Sarah Chen, were all in federal custody. The $28 million was safely back in Sterling Industries' accounts, and the fake supply companies had been shut down. But for Richard Sterling, standing in his office surrounded by FBI agents and evidence of the most painful betrayal of his life, the victory felt hollow. "Mr. Sterling," Emma's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you okay?" Richard looked down at this remarkable child who had saved his company, protected his employees, and possibly saved his life. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Emma replied, with the wisdom that never failed to amaze him. "You just need to remember what you learned." "What did I learn?" Emma smiled, and for the first time in days, it was the carefree smile of a 7-year-old child. "You learned that sometimes the most important people are the ones you don't notice. The janitor who works all night, the little girl who sees things others miss, the employees who trust you with their futures." Richard felt tears beginning to form in his eyes. "Emma, you're absolutely right." 3 weeks later, Richard Sterling stood before the Sterling Industries Board of Directors to announce the biggest changes in the company's history. But this time, he wasn't alone. Emma Thompson sat beside him, wearing a new dress that actually fit properly, her blonde hair neatly braided. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, "I'd like you to meet our new Director of Financial Analysis and Employee Advocacy, Miss Emma Thompson." The board members looked confused. "Richard," said James Patterson, the longest-serving board member, "she's 7 years old. She's also the person who saved this company and protected 3,000 employees' retirement funds," Richard replied firmly. "Emma will work part-time while attending school, helping us identify problems and ensuring we never forget that our most valuable assets are our people." Emma stood up, still needing to adjust the microphone to reach her small height. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. My first recommendation is that Sterling Industries should pay all employees enough money to take care of their families without working 3 jobs." The board members exchanged glances, but Richard nodded approvingly. "Emma's recommendation is approved. We're implementing a company-wide wage increase of 30%, effective immediately." After the meeting, Richard found Jack Thompson in the hallway, wearing a new suit that Emma had insisted on buying for him with her first paycheck. "Jack, I have a proposition for you," Richard said. "How would you like to be Sterling Industries' new head of building operations? It comes with a salary of $80,000 a year, full medical benefits, and a college fund for Emma." Jack's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Daddy," Emma called out, running down the hallway with her arms full of notebooks. "I already calculated our budget, and we can afford a real apartment now, maybe even one with 2 bedrooms. 6 months later, Emma Thompson had become something of a legend in the business world. News articles called her the 7-year-old who saved Wall Street, and universities invited her to speak about financial fraud detection. But on this particular Saturday morning, she was just a little girl sitting in Riverside Park with her father, feeding ducks and enjoying ice cream. "Emma," Jack said, "are you happy? Really happy?" Emma looked at her father, healthier now, less tired, smiling more often. "I'm happy, Daddy, but you know what makes me happiest?" "But what's that, sweetheart?" "We helped people. Mrs. Henderson from accounting told me she can retire now because her pension is safe. Tommy, the delivery driver's daughter, is going to college because Mr. Sterling gave everyone raises. And Mr. Sterling learned that being rich doesn't mean being mean." Jack hugged his daughter, marveling at how this extraordinary child had changed not just their lives, but the lives of thousands of people. "Emma, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Emma smiled, that same brilliant smile that had captivated a boardroom full of executives. "I want to keep helping people solve problems, Daddy. Numbers always tell the truth, and someone needs to listen to what they're saying. As they walked home to their new apartment, the one with 2 bedrooms, a real desk for Emma's notebooks, and windows that faced the sunrise, Emma Thompson was already planning her next adventure. Because somewhere in the world, numbers were telling stories that needed to be heard, and people needed help solving problems they didn't even know they had. And Emma Thompson, the 7-year-old girl who had once been invisible, would make sure those stories were heard. After all, sometimes the smallest voice can make the biggest difference.